Sophie Cunningham spoke out about transgender athletes in women's sports, and the fallout has completely taken over the WNBA. There have been protests, suspended owners, coaches taking sides, and even physical confrontations. And somehow, the situation only seems to be getting worse. Let me break it down. It started with a magazine profile. Not a press conference, not a locker room blow-up. A feature story. Indiana Fever guard Sophie Cunningham, who is averaging 9.3 points off the bench this season, had a feature published by ESPN, where she spoke about what she felt was necessary to protect women's sports. Reporter Hallie Grossman had put together a wide-ranging piece, and Cunningham, one of the league's most polarizing and recognized players, spoke on her perceived political beliefs because of what she looks like and where she's from. Then came the section that mattered. Cunningham told ESPN she'd taken heat for supposedly hating trans people, and she pushed back on that framing directly. "I got a lot of negative feedback about me hating trans," Cunningham said. And I'm like, I never once said that. I think that I'm here to extend love. But I also think, with that love is truth, being honest, and I want to protect young girls in a locker room or young girls in sport who shouldn't have to go against biological men. That's it. That's the paragraph that lit the fuse. Within days, the piece was everywhere. The comments circulated widely and set ablaze a renewed conversation about transgender inclusion. Despite there being no active transgender woman playing or coming into the league, worth sitting with that for a second, there wasn't a live case in front of the WNBA. No transitioned athlete was suiting up against her. This was about the principle, not a specific opponent on the floor. Reporters went back to her for more, and she didn't soften it. A few days later, reporters pressed her again, and Cunningham didn't back off. She doubled down, saying she said what she said, that she thinks it's common sense, and that protecting children matters to her. Now here's where it stopped being a one-woman story. Three separate corners of the league responded almost immediately, each in a completely different way. First, a former teammate turned rival on the court. Chicago Sky guard Dejounte Carrington already had history with the Fever locker room. She'd clashed with Caitlin Clark in prior seasons. When Carrington got ejected for a hard foul on Cunningham in a later matchup, she didn't go quiet about it. After Carrington's ejection, she went on Threads and wrote "white privilege" and tagged the Indiana Fever. Cunningham fired back publicly, rejecting any suggestion that the ejection was about race, and pointing out she'd been ejected herself for the same kind of play a year earlier. Second, a rival head coach turned it into visual protest. Minnesota Lynx coach Cheryl Reeve, who's been in the league for 2 decades, walked into a nationally televised matchup against the Fever wearing a shirt that read "Trans Kids Belong" underneath her blazer. Minnesota Lynx coach Cheryl Reeve wore a "Trans Kids Belong" shirt while coaching against Sophie Cunningham and the Indiana Fever during a marquee WNBA matchup. It wasn't subtle. Reeve wore the shirt under her sports coat, and it was clearly visible on the broadcast, with the play-by-play announcer noting she was wearing it in support of trans kids. Third, and this one surprised people, an outside voice. Most wouldn't expect to weigh in on a WNBA bench player at all. Author J.K. Rowling publicly sided with Cunningham. Sophie Cunningham's comments on the matter captured the attention of many, including Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling, who said she agreed with the Fever guard. So within about 2 weeks of one ESPN profile, you had a teammate accusing her of racial bias, a rival coach staging a wardrobe protest on live television, and a global author wading into a basketball story from an ocean away. That's before a single rally had even been organized, and organizing was coming fast. The trans athlete debate wasn't happening in a vacuum either. Indiana, the state where Cunningham plays professional athletics, has a transgender athlete ban for scholastic and collegiate competitions, one upheld by the Supreme Court in late June. That ruling had already made the topic combustible nationally. Cunningham's comments landed directly on top of it, and the league itself had just locked in new rules of its own. The newly passed 2026 collective bargaining agreement stipulates that only players who are women are eligible to play in the WNBA. Cunningham wasn't asking for a rule change. She was stating a position that on paper already matched league policy. but stating it out loud with her platform turned her into the face of a fight that other players had mostly avoided touching. Because here's the thing about Cunningham. She was never a background name to begin with. A little over a year earlier, she'd become a household name in women's basketball for an entirely different reason. A large chunk of her popularity boom came after Cunningham defended her Indiana Fever teammate Caitlin Clark by throwing Connecticut's Sun guard J.C. Sheldon to the ground, shortly after Sheldon shoved Clark in a game. That moment had already made her a lightning rod, a merchandise magnet, and one of the most recognized bench players in the sport. Cunningham added 700,000 followers on TikTok and more than 244,000 newcomers on Instagram just 3 days after that incident, so when she spoke, people listened and reacted at a volume most reserve players never generate. She wasn't some anonymous rotation piece making a stray comment nobody would notice. She was already one of the most watched personalities in the league, and now she'd attached herself to the most divisive topic in American sports. The profile ran in late July. By the following week, protest signs were already showing up outside arenas. Once the story had legs, it stopped being contained to interviews and social media. It moved outside the buildings. The comments proved controversial and resulted in rallies supporting Cunningham being held prior to Indiana's games, with more planned in the weeks following. These weren't small pockets of people holding handwritten signs on a street corner. They were organized, branded, and timed to specific games on the Fever's schedule: Seattle, then Portland, then Minneapolis, in consecutive road trips. The first flashpoint hit in Seattle that led anti-trans groups to organize a support Sophie Cunningham rally for the Fever's game against the Seattle Storm in Seattle. 2 teenage fans showed up courtside with signs. One read, according to reporting from the scene, a message thanking Cunningham for speaking up for girls. That's when things went sideways in a way nobody could have scripted. During the game, Seattle owner Celeste Keaton berated a pair of teenage girls wearing branded outfits, reportedly making one of them cry for having a different stance on the transgender athlete topic. One witness posted footage claiming Keaton had confronted the teens directly and used harsh language toward them, and that arena security did nothing when asked to intervene. The fallout was immediate. The team has since punished her for her behavior in the form of a fine and suspension. The league made it official. The Storm apologized for an exchange that took place between one of their co-owners and 2 fans, who thanked Sophie Cunningham in the wake of her comments supporting barring transgender girls and women from girls and women's sports. Storm majority owner Ginny Gilder had to put her name on the apology herself, saying everyone attending a Storm game deserves to feel welcome and that the organization remained committed to treating every fan with respect. The suspension wasn't symbolic either. The WNBA suspended Storm minority co-owner Celeste Keaton from attending the team's next 5 home games and fined her an undisclosed amount following the incident. Think about that, an ownership-level figure disciplined by her own league over an argument with 2 teenagers at a basketball game, a game that had nothing to do with Keaton's own team's win column. The family at the center of it didn't feel like the story ended with a fine, though. The teenager involved and her mother spoke out publicly, saying the response fell short. Elizabeth, the mother, said they owe these girls an apology, that Keaton needs to be held accountable, and that they teach their kids every choice has a consequence. They also said nobody from the team or the league had personally reached out to check on the girls after everything blew up. Then there was the question of where Cunningham herself stood in the middle of all this, and for a few days, she was nowhere to be found publicly. After the Seattle game, reporters wanted her reaction. They didn't get it. Cunningham could have addressed all of it after the Fever beat the Storm, but the Fever declined to make her available postgame. And even head coach Stephanie White couldn't respond when asked about it directly, with Fever PR stepping in with a prepared statement instead. The team's official line downplayed any connection at all. Neither our organization nor Sophie had any knowledge of this demonstration, and no contact with its organizers. The statement read, adding that the only goal as a team was to win basketball games and make Fever fans for life. That dodge didn't sit well with some in the media. Commentator Jamela Hill called it out directly, pointing to the contrast between Cunningham's willingness to speak her mind about the league's negative attention weeks earlier and her sudden silence when the actual controversy hit. Cool Jamel Hill posted, adding that Cunningham was building an entire brand on being outspoken. And yet when the smoke came, she ducked it. Cunningham eventually did respond, but on her own terms days later, and she went straight at the Storm co-owner by name rather than staying quiet about it. She called the incident truly embarrassing and said it showed the kind of leader Keaton was, but she also tried to draw a wider circle around her own position, writing publicly that there was room at her table for everyone regardless of where they stood. "I truly believe there is a safe space and love for everybody," she wrote on X. "Biological girls, biological boys, trans women, and trans men. Everyone is welcome at my table." By the time the Fever landed in Portland the following week, the pattern had become the story itself. Arrive in a city, find a rally waiting, get booed by the home crowd, then answer questions about everything except basketball. Cunningham was booed by the Mata Center crowd in Portland when she entered the game, and many in the crowd waved small pink, blue, and white transgender flags. She addressed it head-on afterward, saying she has had nothing to do with the rallies, but commended those bold and courageous enough to speak their truths. 3 cities, 3 rallies, 3 separate controversies stacked on top of each other in under a month, and the season was still going on underneath all of it. By early August, this had stopped being a Sophie Cunningham story and turned into a WNBA story. The league office, the coaches, and even the broadcasters were now part of the plot. Minneapolis is where it peaked. The Lynx were the league's best team, riding a strong record behind Nafisa Collier, and the Fever's visit turned into the most watched flashpoint of the entire saga. Before the shirt, before any of the visuals, Cheryl Reeve had already laid out her position in front of reporters. "We have some issues," Reeve said. "Number 1, we need to protect trans kids. Every kid, to me, it's a human rights issue. Every kid has a right to sports, regardless of gender diverse, transgender," though she added that things get more complicated once puberty, Olympic sport, or scholarships enter the picture. Then game day arrived, and the shirt did the talking. Fans and pundits online reacted instantly to the sideline visual. A head coach making a wardrobe statement mid-broadcast against an opposing player. Some coverage framed it as thoughtful advocacy. Other outlets called it a calculated dig timed for maximum exposure. "There's no reason to pretend the timing was coincidental," one outlet noted flatly. What made it stranger was that Cunningham and Reeve had actually spoken face-to-face before tip-off, and cameras caught it. ESPN then played footage of Cunningham and Reeve in what appeared to be a fairly animated conversation before the game. Nobody outside the two of them knew exactly what was said. Reeve downplayed any hostility afterward, telling reporters she thought it was great, that both of them understood they had platforms and that they'd talk about wanting to educate more than anything, acknowledging some things they had in common and some they differed on. Cunningham's public reaction to the whole spectacle was short. Rather than escalate, she posted 4 words that became a kind of catchphrase for the entire month. "I said what I said." No elaboration, no walkback, no apology tour. That line got repeated by supporters and critics alike for weeks afterward, becoming shorthand for her refusal to budge regardless of who showed up to the arena in protest gear. Away from the sideline theatrics, the actual policy machinery of the league was grinding through the same question at the same time. And this is where the story stopped being about one player's opinion and started looking like an institutional headache. The WNBA had found itself as the new center for the trans sports debate, and the league even convened a task force meeting on transgender athlete policy that same week, afterward announcing there are no immediate eligibility matters affecting the league. That statement was designed to close the conversation. It didn't. If anything, it fed the sense that the league was reacting defensively to a controversy it hadn't asked for, rather than getting ahead of it. Meanwhile, coaches kept getting pulled into questions they clearly didn't want. Fever head coach Stephanie White had to answer for it after nearly every road trip, and her answers stayed carefully centered rather than combative. Before the first wave of rallies, she'd said plainly that she didn't believe exclusion was ever the answer to any of it. Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White spoke before the game about the subject matter, focusing on not excluding anyone. "I don't ever believe that exclusion is an answer," White said. "I just don't." But White also had a basketball problem on her hands, separate from the politics of it. Her team kept getting overshadowed by a story that had nothing to do with the standings. Coach Stephanie White said she was concerned that the controversy was distracting from the team's play, and there was a media relations wrinkle running underneath all of it that kept resurfacing. On multiple occasions, Cunningham and her teammate Caitlin Clark simply weren't made available to reporters after games, where the controversy was the obvious story, a pattern that technically broke league rules. Cunningham and Clark did not speak to reporters after the game despite being requested, a violation of the WNBA's media policy. That dodge and defend cycle, rally outside, silence inside, statement from PR, questions unanswered, repeated itself almost identically from city to city. Seattle, Portland, Minneapolis, same shape, different arena, different local flashpoint each time. The league had a genuine crisis of attention on its hands, and every attempt to contain it seemed to generate another headline instead. By the time the season moved into August, it wasn't just fans and pundits arguing about it anymore. It was showing up in how referees were being second-guessed, how ejections were being read politically, and how nearly every hard foul against Cunningham got framed as something bigger than basketball. Words and t-shirts were one thing. Then the controversy started following her onto the actual floor, in ways that looked a lot less like protest and a lot more like retaliation. The clearest flashpoint came in a game against the Chicago Sky. Dejounte Carrington, already tangled up with the Fever from her threads post weeks earlier, committed a hard foul on Cunningham that got her ejected. After the foul, Cunningham and Carrington were seen getting in each other's faces and yelling, as referees had to separate them following a hard foul that led to Carrington's ejection in the first quarter. Cunningham didn't let the ejection go unanswered, and she pushed back specifically against any suggestion that race played a role in how it was officiated. "I think the league is taking care of that. This has nothing to do with race. Last year, I did the same thing, and I got kicked out. And I deserve to be kicked out. There's no reason even to play that card," Cunningham said. Her own coach didn't fully back her on it either, which is its own small piece of friction inside a team that was already carrying enough of it. Meanwhile, Cunningham's own coach, Stephanie White, defended Carrington in the post-game press conference, while agreeing the flagrant foul and ejection was the right call. And the Carrington relationship wasn't new tension. It had history that predated any of this. During the 2024 season, she had mocked Caitlin Clark for what she believed was flopping, and later called Indiana supporters the nastiest fans in the W after receiving racist abuse from some online users, and had also struck Clark in the eye while defending a pass during the 2024 playoffs, leaving the Fever star with a black eye. So when a new hard foul landed on Cunningham specifically, it read to a lot of observers as the latest chapter in an existing rivalry, now supercharged by the politics sitting on top of it. A separate outlet's reporting on the same period pointed to another physical incident during the height of the rally stretch. A strike to the face during a game which conservative commentary framed as evidence that hostility toward Cunningham had moved past commentary. The hostility toward Cunningham hasn't stayed verbal either. During a recent game, Chicago Sky player Dejounte Carrington struck Cunningham in the face on a layup attempt. Off the court, the physical tension showed up in a different form through her own family. Her sister, Lindsay Cunningham, vented online about a technical foul call that felt questionable, which reopened an old wound about Sophie's own reputation for physical play. Many social media users were quick to point out that Sophie isn't the safest player on the basketball court, with the Sheldon takedown cited as the perfect example. Fans didn't hesitate to remind Lindsay of that history in the replies, turning a family defense into another round of the same argument that had been running for weeks. Even her past knee injury got dragged back into the conversation, months after the fact, as fans tried to decide whether rough play against Cunningham carried some kind of intent. During a prior Sun matchup, a collision left her with a season-ending tear, and speculation swirled that it may not have been accidental given the earlier scuffle history between the two teams. Sun veteran Bria Hartley had become notorious for being in the middle of several scuffles during that WNBA season, which sparked debate about whether she was a dirty player, with some fans even claiming she dove at Cunningham's knee on purpose. Cunningham herself shut that theory down directly, saying flatly there was no way her friend would have gone in there intentionally to hurt her. That's the pattern that had formed by the middle of August. Every hard foul, every ejection, every physical exchange on the floor got read through the lens of the trans athlete fight, whether it actually had anything to do with it or not. A flagrant call became a referendum. A family tweet became a referendum. The line between basketball incident and politics had basically disappeared, and the rallies kept scheduling themselves around the calendar like clockwork, with another Cunningham rally already scheduled ahead of the Fever's game against the New York Liberty. Controversy is bound to surround Cunningham and Indiana beyond Chicago. There was no sign of the cycle slowing down. Every road trip now came preloaded with its own protest, its own counter-protest, and its own aftermath to manage. A month in, nothing about this had cooled off. If anything, the newest additions to the saga made it stranger, not calmer. Just this past week, footage surfaced of Cunningham at a bar after a Fever game, caught singing along to a country song with patriotic lyrics. After the Fever game, Sophie Cunningham showed up at a bar and started singing courtesy of the red, white, and blue. On its own, a player unwinding after a game wouldn't be news. In the middle of everything else swirling around her, it got treated as one more data point, proof to supporters that she wasn't rattled, proof to critics that she wasn't taking any of it seriously. The commentary around her hadn't softened either. Conservative columnists kept framing her as someone standing firm under pressure she never sought out. Sophie Cunningham has spent the past month at the center of a controversy she never asked for, with commentators arguing that Cunningham said what most Americans already believe, and that the league's loudest voices have been trying to make her pay for it ever since. Meanwhile, the rally circuit that had trailed the Fever since Seattle showed no sign of stopping. Every road city seemed to produce its own version of the same scene. Supporters outside with signs, counter-demonstrators nearby, and Cunningham stuck answering for a moment. She said she never organized in the first place. She'd said as much back in Portland, and she kept saying versions of it through August. She wasn't behind the organizing, but she wasn't going to distance herself from the people showing up on her behalf either. Her actual on-court production through all of it stayed roughly what it had been all season, a steady bench scorer, not a star by the box score, but never short on attention. Her points per game average was the best of her career the prior season, and this year she'd settled into a similar bench role, averaging in the high single digits, while the headlines around her dwarfed anything happening in the actual box score. The league's own position hadn't moved from where the task force left it. No rule change, no disciplinary action against Cunningham, no eligibility case actually on the table. That no immediate matters line from earlier in August was still, technically, the league's last word on the substance of the debate. Everything since then had been reaction to reaction. A coach's shirt, an owner's outburst, a foul, a bar video, a fresh wave of signs outside the next arena. What had changed was the shape of the audience around her. Supporters had turned "I said what I said" into a rallying cry printed on signs and shirts of their own. Critics had turned the Reeve shirt and the Keaton suspension into their own shorthand for how far the backlash had traveled. Neither side showed signs of standing down, and neither did Cunningham. She kept getting asked, city after city, whether she regretted saying any of it, or whether she wished the ESPN piece had never run the way it did. Her answer never really changed from the first week to the last. She'd said what she said. She meant it when she said it, and every fresh headline, every shirt, every suspended owner, every hard foul only seemed to convince her she'd meant it more. Whatever happens with the eligibility debate at the league level, whatever the next road trip brings in terms of signs and countersigns, one thing was true by the middle of August. A bench player who was already famous for defending a teammate on the floor had become the single most talked about figure in the entire WNBA season, for reasons that had nothing to do with her scoring average. And the story wasn't finished, it was just waiting for the next arena.